The cardboard boxes stacked against my living room wall looked like tombstones marking the death of my marriage. Each one held a fragment of a life that no longer existed. The echo of laughter in rooms now silent. The dust of memories too heavy to lift. I sat on the cold hardwood floor, my back pressed against the radiator, holding the final divorce decree in one hand and my phone in the other. The timestamp glared up at me, 3:47 p.m. Exactly 1 hour after Judge Morrison's gavel came down and shattered 22 years of what I once believed was love. Then my phone buzzed. Veronica's name flashed on the screen, and for a second I almost didn't open it. But pain has a way of tempting curiosity, doesn't it? Against my better judgment, I swiped. Hope you enjoy your pathetic studio apartment. That was the first line. Then another message appeared, each word like a blade dragged across old scars. Theo Roland just moved his grand piano into your old music room. The movers said it's worth more than you make in 5 years. Oh, and we're converting your practice studio into his cigar lounge. You know, for someone who actually matters in this world. My chest tightened. Before I could even process it, another buzz. A photo this time. Roland, tall, smug, expensive, standing in my home office. His Harvard diploma already hanging where my grandfather Eugene's war medals used to rest. His smirk wasn't a smile, it was the expression of a predator savoring the moment before the kill. And then came the final message. You said'll die poor and alone, just like your grandfather. I felt something inside me snap. My arm pulled back, ready to hurl the phone against the wall, to silence the venom when it rang. Not a text this time. A call. I looked down. No number, just a string of zeros ending in a single one. It was absurd, almost cinematic, but somehow I couldn't look away. 3 rings, 4, 5. On the 6th, my thumb moved on its own. This is Theodore Eugene Brennan. I managed, my voice raw, shaky. What came next changed everything. Mr. Brennan, a voice said, crisp and deliberate, military, authoritative. This is Colonel James Whitmore from the Pentagon SIPS Estate Recovery Division. I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say. I blinked, trying to steady my breathing. Who is this? What are you talking about? The colonel continued, calm, almost mechanical. Your grandfather, Staff Sergeant Eugene Brennan, completed a classified military operation in Cambodia in 1964. That operation was codenamed Night Music. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it made no sense. My grandfather was a supply sergeant in Vietnam. He played piano in the officers' SIPS clubs. Everyone knows that. That was his cover, the colonel replied. Your grandfather was a cryptography specialist with the 5th Special Forces Group. The mission he completed has been classified beyond top secret until now. As of midnight last night, that classification expired. I stood up slowly as if the ground itself had shifted under me. What are you saying? I'm saying, the colonel said, that your grandfather recovered something in the Cambodian jungle, something that has accrued significant value over the past 6 decades. He never claimed his compensation due to the classified nature of the operation. That compensation, with interest and inflation adjustment, is now worth approximately $156 million. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering across the floor. For a moment I just stood there, frozen, dizzy, the echo of that number ringing louder than the world around me. I scrambled to pick up the phone, pressing it to my ear again. That SIP's impossible. My grandfather died in a state-run nursing home. My parents had to take out a second mortgage just to pay for his care. The Colonel SIP's voice didn't waver. Staff Sergeant Brennan made a choice, Mr. Brennan. He chose silence to protect his family and his country. But he also made provisions. The money can only be released to his direct descendant, and only if certain conditions are met. What conditions? You need to come to Washington immediately. There SEP's a Delta flight leaving Ipshare in 3 hours. A ticket has been purchased in your name. First class. Window seat, 14 eyes. That detail, too specific, too personal, made my blood run cold. How did you even know to call me today? Right after my divorce? There was a pause. Then the colonel said quietly, Your grandfather Sip's instructions were very specific, Mr. Brennan. We were to contact you on the day you lost everything. His exact words were said, when my grandson has nothing left to lose, give him everything I couldn't set claim. My throat went dry. Sep's been dead for 35 years. How could he possibly? Eugene Brennan knew many things, Mr. Brennan. He was very good at predicting patterns. It's what made him invaluable to military intelligence. The question now is, are you ready to learn what he knew? The room felt smaller, the air heavier. The clock started ticking the moment I made this call, the colonel continued. You have 72 hours to complete what your grandfather started, or the entire inheritance transfers to the Department of Defense. I walked to the window, staring out at the distant gray shimmer of Lake Michigan. The water looked angry, restless, like my grandfather's eyes in those old photos, staring at something far beyond the lens. I thought of Veronica's message, of Roland's smug grin, of every quiet humiliation I'd swallowed in the name of love and pride. And then I asked, Colonel, what exactly did my grandfather recover in that jungle? There was a long silence. Finally, the colonel said, the answer to that question is worth $156 million, Mr. Brennan. I said I'll see you at the Pentagon tomorrow morning, 0800 hours sharp. Bring your grandfather Sip's journal, the one with the musical compositions. You do still have it, Don sipped you. My eyes drifted to the single box I hadn't let Veronica touch during the divorce. The one labeled Grandpa Eugene's Things, written in my mother's careful handwriting. Yes, I said quietly. I have it. Good, the colonel replied. One more thing, Mr. Brennan. Your ex-wife Sip's a new companion, Roland Ashford. His grandfather, William Ashford, was a defense contractor in 1964. This is not a coincidence. Nothing about your current situation is a coincidence. The line went dead. And just like that, the silence was louder than ever. I stood there in that hollow apartment, surrounded by cardboard tombstones, holding a phone that had just connected me to a past I didn't even know existed. Outside, Chicago's skyline rose against a bruised sky. Somewhere out there, Veronica was probably toasting her new life, with Roland, in my old home, but suddenly, none of that mattered. Because my grandfather, the quiet man who used to hum jazz tunes at the family piano, had left behind a mystery, one that was only now beginning to play its first note. I walked to the box, opened the lid, and pulled out the leather-bound journal. The same one I'd played from as a kid, the one filled with Eugene's handwritten compositions, yellowed and delicate. And there, in the margin of the first page, faintly written in pencil, were 5 words I'd never noticed before. For Theodore, when everything ends. That night, I barely slept. And as I stared at the city lights flickering through the blinds, my mind drifted back 3 months earlier, to the stage at Symphony Center, where this entire symphony of loss had begun. The final notes of Brahms's concerto soared through the hall, my violin weeping its last phrase. The audience rose to their feet, 2,000 people clapping, cheering. But in the third row, Veronica sat motionless, her hands still, her eyes empty. That should have been my first warning. At 47, my life had settled into a rhythm as precise as a metronome. Mornings at 6, scales and sonatas before sunrise. Veronica doing yoga on the terrace overlooking the pool. We lived in Lake Forest, 2 acres of manicured perfection, each room curated by Veronica's flawless taste, a house built on my music and her ambition. When my mother visited for the first time, she run her hand along the marble countertops, whispering, "Your grandfather would be so proud. He always said music would take you places he never could." Grandpa Eugene had been gone 12 years by then, but his presence lingered like a melody you can't quite forget. My father Douglas kept his photo on the mantle, a black and white portrait of a young soldier with eyes sharp as winter. Next to it sat his bronze star. None of us knew what he'd done to earn it. He came back from Vietnam different, my father used to say after his 3rd beer. Spent 6 months in Cambodia before his official deployment even started. Never talked about it, just played that piano like he was trying to drown out ghosts. I'd inherited Eugene's gift, though I'd channeled it differently. He'd played jazz, wild, improvisational, free. I chose classical, disciplined, exacting, safe. And Veronica loved that about me. We met 23 years ago at a charity gala. She was luminous, ambitious, wearing a borrowed dress and fake pearls, but her confidence made them look priceless. "You not like these other men," she whispered that night as we danced. "You create something eternal." We married, moved, climbed, conquered. For a decade, it was good. She built homes, I filled them with music, we talked about children, but the timing was never right. Always one more concert, one more renovation, one more perfect excuse. But love, like an old violin, doesn't break all at once. It slips, slowly, a string loosening, a note falling out of tune. Veronica joined a country club. Lunches with women whose husbands owned tech companies and hedge funds. She started coming home with new stories. "Did you know Roland Ashford just bought a Basque yacht?" she said one evening, scrolling through her phone. 23 million for a painting. Roland Ashford. That name would become the fault line that cracked my life in two. He hired her to redesign his penthouse in Lincoln Park, a job she accepted without even asking me. "It's just one project," she said. "His money spends the same as anyone Seps." But it didn't. His money came wrapped in charm. Compliments. The kind that left me feeling smaller every time she repeated them. At a dinner party months later, Roland smiled at me across the table. "Your husband Seps quite accomplished," he said, resting a hand, too casually, on Veronica Seps' shoulder. "It must be fascinating living with an artist." He said the word artist like it was a quaint hobby, something to pat on the head. Veronica laughed, and in that moment, something inside me, something quiet and old, began to unravel. But that laughter, that single sound, was nothing compared to the ring of my phone 3 months later. Because when I answered that strange call, I realized something that still chills me to this day. My grandfather's silence hadn't been ordinary. It had been deliberate, strategic. And the truth buried in those yellowed pages of his journal wasn't just about the past. It was about me. And whatever he had hidden in that Cambodian jungle 60 years ago, it was still out there, waiting to be found. Waiting for me. 6 months ago, my life was supposed to crescendo into triumph. The spring Vienna tour, 3 weeks performing with the Vienna Philharmonic, was meant to be the pinnacle of everything I'd spent my life working toward. A career-defining moment, playing in the Musikverein under chandeliers that had heard Mozart himself. Instead, it became the setting for my marriage's final movement. While I played Mozart, Veronica was playing house, not in Vienna, but in Roland Ashford's penthouse in Chicago. It began with a FaceTime call at 2 in the morning. I remember the blue light on my hotel wall, the silence of a foreign city beyond the window. My nephew James's face filled the screen, pale, anxious, and too young to be carrying bad news. "Uncle Theo," he whispered, "I need to tell you something." His voice cracked like it used to when he was 13, the same voice that once called me the night after his father's funeral. "I saw Aunt Veronica," he said, swallowing hard, "at Mr. Ashford Seps' office building tonight." I remember forcing a smile, pretending calm. "She mentioned something about expanding his project," I said. "She Seps redesigning his office space too." James shook his head. "It was midnight, Uncle Theo. The whole building was dark except for the penthouse. They were on the balcony, and they were—" He stopped, words collapsing in his throat. "God, I don't even know how to say this," he breathed. "They weren't looking at fabric samples." The bow slipped from my hand, clattering against the music stand like a gunshot. "What exactly did you see?" I asked. "They were kissing. Like, really kissing. Her dress it wasn't completely on anymore. I said, "Ma sorry." I said, "Ma so sorry." Seconds later, my phone buzzed. Photos. Veronica pressed against the glass railing, Roland's hands in her hair, the Chicago skyline glittering behind them like a cruel celebration of my humiliation. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m., the same moment she had texted me that she was going to bed early with a headache. That night, I performed anyway. Brahms, then Mozart. My fingers moved with perfect precision, every note in place, but my soul had already left the stage. The Austrian critics called it technically flawless but emotionally vacant. They were right. Because somewhere across the Atlantic, the life I thought I knew was disintegrating. When I returned to Chicago 3 days later, the confrontation was inevitable. Veronica was in the kitchen humming Vivaldi's Spring, irony sharp enough to taste, wearing a new pair of diamond earrings I didn't recognize. "Nice earrings," I said, setting my violin case on the counter, my voice steady but my hands trembling. She touched them reflexively. "Thank you. They were a bonus from the Ashford project." "Must be some project," I said, working past midnight, earning jewelry. Her face changed in stages. Surprise, calculation, defiance, until it finally settled on something cold and resolute. "You know," I said, "James saw you. He works in Roland Sepp's building. Or did you forget about family while you were undressing for your client?" She didn't flinch. She just set down her coffee cup with deliberate calm. "I wasn't going to insult you by denying it," she said. "How generous of you." "You want me to apologize?" she continued. "Fine. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. But I'm not sorry it happened." She stood smoothing her skirt, the same hands that used to trace my face after every performance now moving with surgical detachment. "Do you know what it's like?" she asked. "Being married to someone who loves dead composers more than living people? You spend 6 hours a day with your violin, Theo. 6 hours. Roland spends that time building empires." "I'm a musician," I said. "This is what I do. It's what you said you loved about me." She smiled bitterly. "I was 29. I thought passion for art meant passion for life. But you don't live, Theo. You perform." Even our marriage became a recital. The same movements over and over. Roland shows me new worlds. Last week we flew to Monaco for lunch. "For lunch?" I asked. "You threw away 22 years for lunch in Monaco." "No," she said softly. "I threw it away for someone who makes me feel alive." She took a step closer, her eyes hard as glass. "You want to know the difference between you and Roland? When he walks into a room, people notice. When you walk in, they might appreciate your talent, but nobody fears you. Nobody needs you. Nobody sips life changes because Theodore Brennan exists." I stared at her for a long time before replying. "Except yours. My money changed your life pretty dramatically." She laughed. Sharp and cruel. "Your money? Theo, Roland makes your annual salary in a week. That house you're so proud of, his wine cellar, is worth more. You're a museum piece. A relic playing relics for other relics. The world moved on and you're still standing on stage performing music by men who've been dead for centuries." The divorce was swift and brutal. Her lawyer was her father's golf partner. Connected, smooth, predatory. Illinois law favored her, of course, the non-working spouse who had sacrificed her career. She wanted the house, half the retirement, and lifetime alimony. "You keep your violin," her lawyer said, as if granting mercy, "and one vehicle." My mother Patricia wept when she found out. "That woman never deserved you," she said. My father Douglas was more pragmatic. "Eugene lost everything too," he reminded me. "Came back from the war to find his first wife had sold the family farm and vanished. He rebuilt from nothing and died with nothing." "He died with dignity," I said quietly. My father nodded. "Sometimes that's all a man can keep." And that's what I thought I had left. Dignity. Until the call. The Pentagon rose out of the Virginia morning like a geometric god, pale limestone reflecting the early sun. I'd taken the reed-eye from Chicago, my grandfather's leather journal wrapped in a towel inside my backpack, too precious to trust to checked luggage. The Uber driver whistled when I told him my destination. "Pentagon at dawn, you military?" "My grandfather was," I said. "Staff Sergeant Eugene Brennan." "Must have been something special," he said. If only he knew. I'd spent the flight rereading Eugene's journal, tracing notes and margins that suddenly looked different. Patterns, codes hidden between staves of music. What I'd thought were dynamic markings, crescendos, decrescendos, were something else entirely. At security, Colonel James Whitmore was waiting. Mid-50s, posture sharp enough to cut glass. His handshake was brief but unyielding. "Mr. Brennan," he said, "thank you for coming. Before we proceed, I need to verify your identity, beyond documentation. Tell me about your grandfather Sipp's piano." 1947, Baldwin Spinet. Mahogany finish, bought from a pawn shop in Raleigh after the war. Cigarette burn on middle seat. Whitmore nodded. And what did he call his Sunday night performances at the veteran Sepp's home? I smiled faintly. Church for the unchurched. He said music was the only religion that never lied. The Colonel Sepp's eyes softened just a fraction. Follow me. We went underground, 3 levels down, past checkpoints that hummed with quiet menace. Finally, we entered a room with no windows, just fluorescent lights and a metal table covered in file boxes. Your grandfather sits real service record, Whitmore said, opening one. What you set are about to learn has been classified beyond top secret for 60 years. Inside the box were photographs, Eugene in jungle fatigues, standing with a small unit beside the wreckage of a Soviet aircraft. Their faces were redacted with black ink. Operation Night Music, Whitmore said. Cambodia. February 1964. Officially, there were no Soviets in Cambodia. Officially, we weren't set there either. What did they find? I asked. The plane was carrying an early prototype of an encryption computer designed to encode nuclear launch sequences. But that wasn't set the prize. The pilot, Victor Klov, survived the crash. He was dying but conscious. Your grandfather spoke enough Russian to communicate. Whitmore handed me a transcript. Redacted lines, fragmented sentences. Klov gave your grandfather information. Swiss bank accounts used to pay double agents. Account numbers, passwords, code phrases, and your grandfather memorized them. He showed me another photo, Eugene holding a metal briefcase. He could have claimed that money at any time, Whitmore said. $22 million in 1964. Do you understand what that SIP's worth now? Why didn't set he? I asked. Because claiming it would have exposed the operation. Lives would have been lost. He chose silence. Whitmore SIP's tone shifted, reverent now. But he documented everything in code, hidden in his music. The Pentagon owed him compensation for the mission, but he never claimed it. Said it would raise too many questions. Now that classification has expired. He reached into another folder and handed me an envelope. My name written in shaky, familiar handwriting. It was my grandfather Set's. He left instructions, Whitmore said quietly. This could only be opened when his grandson had lost everything material and could gain everything essential. I tore it open with trembling hands. Inside were 3 pages. Theodore, it began, if you're reading this, your marriage has ended, and you've lost your worldly possessions. I know this because patterns repeat through generations. You love completely, which means you can be hurt completely. The music I left you contains more than notes. Each composition maps coordinates. Each rhythm change marks a sequence. In Baltimore, Storage Unit 447, paid through 2087, you'll find what I could neither destroy nor claim. The Pentagon money is yours regardless, but claiming what's in Baltimore means choosing truth over comfort. The Swiss accounts still exist. The money cleaned by time but born of blood. One name will matter to you personally by the time you read this. You have 72 hours. If you don't claim it, everything reverts to defense. If you do, you'll hold the power to correct history or bury it. Choose wisely. Music, like truth, resonates across time. Your grandfather, Eugene. Baltimore smelled of rust and rain when I arrived. The storage facility looked abandoned. Graffiti, cracked bricks, flickering lights. But when I entered the code, hidden in the third movement of Autumn Fugue, the keypad clicked green. Unit 447 waited at the end of a long corridor. Inside just one thing, a military green filing cabinet. On top, a chess set frozen mid-game. I recognized it instantly. The Budapest Gambit. The gambit means sacrifice, Grandpa used to say. You lose material to gain position. I opened the top drawer. Inside, a single safety deposit box key, Baltimore First National. And beneath it, a leather portfolio. Inside were documents that made my hands shake. Photocopies of Swiss bank statements, 1964 to 1970. Deposits from American defense contractors to Soviet intelligence agents. But it wasn't the amounts that froze my blood, it was the names. Ashford Industries, 17 times. William Ashford, Roland Sepp's grandfather. He'd sold defective helicopter parts to the army while secretly funding Soviet operations in Cambodia. American soldiers had died in crashes caused by parts he knew were faulty. Profit margin 43%. Blood money 22 million. And now, I was holding the proof. My phone rang. An unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Mr. Brennan," the voice said, smooth and confident. I froze. I knew that voice. "This is Roland Ashford." And just like that, the past, the present, and the secrets buried in both collided. Imagine this: your phone rings at 2 a.m., you answer half asleep, and on the screen is your nephew's pale face, trembling, eyes red, voice cracking like he's 13 again. And the words that come out of his mouth will burn everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and the woman waiting for you back home. That was the night my life broke in two. 3 weeks performing with the Vienna Philharmonic, what should have been a triumph, a celebration of a lifetime in music, became the overture to my downfall. While I played Mozart beneath chandeliers in Vienna's Musikverein, my wife Veronica was playing a very different symphony in another man's penthouse back in Chicago. The FaceTime call came at 2 in the morning, Vienna time. My nephew James looked terrified. "Uncle Theo," he said, voice cracking, "I need to tell you something." When he told me he'd seen Veronica with Roland Ashford, my client, my supposed friend, on the balcony of his penthouse, I wanted to believe there was some mistake. But then the photos came. There she was, pressed against the glass railing, Roland's hands tangled in her hair, the Chicago skyline glittering behind them like confetti at the funeral of my marriage. She had texted me minutes earlier saying she was going to bed early with a headache. That night, I played my concert flawlessly. The critics called it technically perfect, but emotionally absent. Of course it was. My fingers knew the notes, but my heart had forgotten the music. When I returned to Chicago 3 days later, she was in the kitchen humming Vivaldi's Spring, wearing diamond earrings I didn't recognize. I asked where she got them. She smiled faintly. "A bonus from the Ashford Project," she said. And that's when I told her I knew. That James had seen her, that the photos existed. Her expression shifted like movements in a symphony: surprise, calculation, defiance, and finally cold resolve. "You want me to apologize?" she asked. "Fine. I said I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but I said not sorry it happened." I remember every word. She said I spent 6 hours a day with my violin with dead composers. That Roland spent that time building empires. "You don't set live, Theo," she said. "You just perform." Even our marriage became a recital. Then she told me Roland made more in a week than I made in a year, that I was a museum piece, a relic, playing music by men who'd been dead for centuries. And that's when I realized the truth. Love doesn't always die quietly. Sometimes it burns your house down and leaves the ashes humming Vivaldi. The divorce was swift, brutal, and predictably lopsided. Illinois law favored the non-working spouse, especially one who sacrificed her career. She wanted the house, half the accounts, alimony, maintenance of her lifestyle. Her lawyer naturally was her father's golf partner. I walked away with my violin, a car, and a ghost in my chest where my marriage used to be. But life has a strange way of layering tragedy with destiny. Because just when I thought I'd lost everything, the Pentagon called. They said they needed to discuss my grandfather, Staff Sergeant Eugene Brennan. So I packed his journal, the one he'd kept from the war, wrapped it in a towel, and flew to Washington. At dawn, the Pentagon looked like a sleeping giant of stone and shadow. Colonel James Whitmore met me at security. He was all pressed uniform and authority. "Before we proceed," he said, "tell me about your grandfather Sepp's piano." I did. The mahogany Baldwin spinet, the cigarette burn on Middle C, his Sunday night performances at the Veterans Home, church for the unchurched, he called them. Whitmore nodded. "Follow me." We descended 3 levels underground, past layers of concrete and security, until we entered a vault with no windows. Just fluorescent light, a table, and boxes of files. "What you are about to learn," he said, "has been classified for 60 years. My grandfather Sepp's real service record was inside. Eugene had been part of something called Operation Night Music, February 1964. His unit entered Cambodia to investigate a downed Soviet reconnaissance plane, one that officially never existed. The pilot survived. His name was Victor Klav, dying but conscious. He told my grandfather about Swiss bank accounts used to pay double agents millions of dollars moving through shadow networks. Eugene memorized everything before turning over the evidence to command. He could have claimed the money, $22 million in 1964, but he didn't. He stayed silent to protect lives. Whitmore handed me an envelope. My name was written on it in my grandfather's shaky handwriting. Inside were 3 pages. Theodore, if you're reading this, your marriage has ended. You've lost your worldly possessions. I know this because patterns repeat. I saw your father's romantic nature in you. You love completely, which means you can be hurt completely. The music I left contains more than notes. Each composition maps to coordinates. Each rhythm change marks a number sequence. In Baltimore Storage Unit 447, you'll find what I couldn't destroy and couldn't claim. The Pentagon money is yours regardless. But the truth, what's in Baltimore, is your choice. You have 72 hours. Choose wisely. Music like truth resonates across time. I flew straight to Baltimore. The storage facility looked abandoned, but the keypad worked when I entered the code hidden in one of Eugene's fugues. Inside was a single filing cabinet. On top of it, a chessboard frozen mid-game. The Budapest Gambit, a move about sacrifice. In the top drawer was a key, and beneath it, documents that made my hands tremble. Swiss bank statements. 1964 through 1970. Money from American defense contractors to Soviet agents. But it was the names that stopped my heart cold. Ashford Industries. 17 transactions. Roland Sepp's family. His grandfather had sold defective helicopter parts to the US Army, parts that caused fatal crashes while secretly funding the Soviets. The profit margin. 43%. The cost? Dozens of American lives. And the money was still sitting in those Swiss accounts. That's Sepp's when my phone rang. Unknown number. A voice I knew too well. I understand you've been to Washington, Roland said. I asked how he knew. He laughed. The same way I knew your wife was vulnerable to someone who could offer her more. We've been watching your family for 60 years, waiting for someone to claim what doesn't belong to them. He told me my grandfather was a thief. That truth is what powerful people decide it is. Then he made me an offer. Take the Pentagon money and disappear. Leave Baltimore now, or continue and discover what real loss looks like. The line went dead. I stood in that storage unit, surrounded by the ghosts of a war older than me, and made my choice. I called my cousin Dennis, an investigative journalist. Dennis, I said, clear your schedule. I have the story that will define your career. We met at the Baltimore First National Vault the next day. The safety deposit box held originals of every document and something else. Reel-to-reel tapes labeled Kozlov Confession. They contained the dying Soviet pilot's voice, confessing everything. And at the bottom of the box, one final piece of music, Redemption Suite. When I hummed the melody, I realized it was an encryption, a musical password to the Swiss accounts. Eugene had hidden access to millions inside his own compositions. For the next 24 hours, we worked non-stop. Forensic accountants, legal experts, every document cross-referenced. The accounts were real, active. $87 million. Blood money. Clean now, but born in corruption. Dennis looked at me. If we publish this, it destroys Ashford Industries. And Veronica Sepp's tied to him now. You sure you want to do this? I thought about the soldiers who died in those crashes, about Eugene's silence, about my own humiliation. And I said, we do it smart. Historical documents first. Let the world connect the dots. And the money? It would go to a trust for the families of those soldiers. Every penny. By morning, the Washington Post headline read, Blood Money, How Defense Contractor Fraud Funded Enemy Operations in Vietnam. By noon, Ashford Industries had lost 40% of its stock value. By nightfall, Roland Ashford was under federal investigation. I watched from my new office a brownstone I'd bought to house the Eugene Brennan Foundation for Veterans Families. The Pentagon's compensation had cleared $156 million, legal, clean. mine. But I couldn't stop thinking about the 19-year-old soldiers who'd never come home. Veronica called 17 times that day. I ignored them all until the 18th. Her voice was broken. Theo. Roland Sepp's been arrested. The FBI took everything. The house, the accounts, even my car. I have nothing. I said, you have what you chose. She cried, said she wanted to come home. But that house wasn't ours anymore. I'd bought it back at auction and given it to my uncle and aunt who'd lost their own home to medical bills. Her sobs echoed through the phone. What am I supposed to do? I told her the same thing I did. Start over. 6 months later, I stood under the lights at Symphony Center, performing Redemption Suite for the first time. No one in the audience knew that the melodies were once encrypted passwords to blood-soaked fortunes. My mother sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face during the Adagio, the movement that carried the names of the soldiers who died in Ashford's helicopters. By then, the trust had already paid out $12 million to their families. Dennis won a Pulitzer. Roland went to prison for 7 years. Veronica remarried her divorce lawyer ironically. And me? I learned that inheritance isn't money, it's memory. I still live modestly, still play 6 hours a day, but now I teach free music lessons to veterans' children. In every note I hear Eugene Sepp's voice whispering through time. Music, like truth, resonates. Sometimes I play in nursing homes like he did. And when I end with his Moonlight Serenade, an old veteran will sometimes look up and whisper, "Night music. You know about night music." And I shall nod. Because my grandfather made sure someone would remember. And the truth he buried in melody still hums beneath the surface, waiting for its next listener. Because justice, like music, never dies. It just waits for the right hands to play it. And somewhere in the silence between the notes, the next movement is already beginning.